That's what we want to do. Hi, everyone. Thank you for coming along tonight. I'm sure there's going to be a few more people dipping in shortly. We're hugely excited that Reece is with us. Can I ask you all to mute yourselves for a little bit? It's going to get noisy with people talking over. I'm trying to see if I can mute some people yet, but if everyone can just mute themselves for a minute, that would be great. I used to be able to mute people. I don't be able to think I can do that. So yeah, Reece is going to talk to us today a little bit about his fantastic books, his new one that's just come out, and obviously his previous one as well, which is we're hugely honoured, Reece, because we get a few authors that come to Leadership Academy and come and speak to us, but obviously you're so far away, we've never really had the opportunity to get to know you or get to know much about you. So everyone's very kind of excited to find out a little bit more.
Thank you. Well, similarly, I am equally honored because, as you say, the distance is so great between where I am and where you are that my first book came out 2 years ago now, and I don't get that many opportunities to speak with people in the UK. So it's always a joy when I do.
There we are. Speak of the devil. Oh, literally just said your name.
Are we good? Yes.
Sorry, I'm muted as well. I was just muting everyone else. So I'll just leave you to this for a bit then. You can talk to us a little bit. And then, guys, if you want to put questions into the chat, then what we do is we kind of go through them, or at the end, you can unmute yourself and ask Reece any questions that you have. Is that okay? Is everybody okay with this? Excellent. Thumbs up. Okay, I'm going to mute myself as well then, Reece, and just let you kind of crack on.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah. Yes. Hello, everyone again. Good morning. Very early good morning from Sydney in Australia. It's 6 a.m. here, but good evening where you are. And thank you for joining us on this Zoom to chat about my books, in particular, the new one, The Lonely Lighthouse of Elston Fright, which I've just received my author copies for a number of days ago, so the timing could not be more perfect. I'm going to keep it fairly casual. I'm just going to talk a bit about my own writing journey, how I got to this Elston Fright Tales series. And yeah, hopefully you have some questions as well. And I can make sure that I'm answering those and giving you the information you want and need as well. I suppose a bit about myself first. I'm in Sydney now, but I grew up in a much, much smaller place. I'm from a rural, like a regional town in Western Australia. I grew up on a farm. The nearest town to our farm had maybe 170 people in it. We don't really use the word village here, but you would call it a village. And right from sort of the age of 10, I was an avid reader. Of course, I had my brother and my sister on the farm. But apart from that, it could get, a little lonely. And so I made my friends in books. And then when I actually went to boarding school for high school, and I had this amazing English teacher, Mr. Webb, who always saw me with, a book tucked under my arm. And it was usually a fantasy book. And he said, Reece, have you ever considered writing your own stories? And that was the beginning of it all. And I think this is a not uncommon story. But all through high school, I was tucked away in the library with teacher librarian Mrs. Gannon and the library assistant Ms. Horn. They would always save a desk for me, and I'd go and I'd scribble away, creating characters and worlds. My stories never got much further than those initial outlines at first. And then I actually... You can't hear me? Hello?
I think she's sorted. I think it's sorted now.
Can people hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, so I sort of started writing in high school, but never really saw anything through to completion. And then I actually went on and had a completely different career in my early 20s. I went and studied nutrition and was working as a clinical nutritionist, but I still wanted to write stories. And so from the age of about 25, I was working in, establishing this clinic. And then in the evenings, I'd go home And in my mind, I was putting on like a superhero cape and living this secret double life as I sat down to write stories. And it was always stories for middle grade readers because that is when books were so important to me. They were places to make new friends in the characters. They were places to go on adventures. And they were places to, and although I didn't realize it at the time, perhaps, start making sense of the world around me and start engaging with the themes in the books, even if they were subtle and I didn't realize that's what was happening. So middle grade books have always held such a special place in my heart. And so that's what I started writing. In the evenings, I would write new stories. And this time I did see them through till their completion. I wrote my first manuscript. It took 2 years, sent it out to actually, no, I didn't even send that one out to publishers because I think even I realized by the time I was done that it was a bit rubbish. But the second one, which took me another 2 years, I did send out to publishers in the hope that I might have some luck, and was unsuccessful. Never mind. I sat down again and I wrote a third manuscript, and at the same time started to do more writing courses, realizing maybe I don't know everything I need to know just yet. And finished a third manuscript again. Took 2 years to write this middle grade manuscript, and sent that out, and again did not have any luck. At the same time, a good friend of mine that I'd known at that stage for about 10 or 12 years, who also had a completely different background, he worked in theatre. He had just started to have some luck with his own young adult novels, and his first one had been picked up. And he could see I was a little despondent, as you can imagine, 6 years of writing and hadn't had much luck. And he said, Reece, why don't you just set yourself a smaller task, a manageable task? There's a short story competition run out of Adelaide to write a young adult horror story. And so I did that. I thought and submitted that. It also didn't go anywhere. I didn't win. I wasn't picked up, but I see that as a moment that changed things for me, because up until that point, all three manuscripts I'd written had been very much whimsical fantasy, sort of portal fantasies, other worlds. But writing this horror story for young adults actually put me in a spookier mindset. I had a lot of fun writing something that was a little bit darker. And so I think that made me subconsciously sort of on the lookout, I suppose, for, okay, perhaps not horror, but is there something in that spookier, gothic fantasy for kids area that I would like to write? And at the time, I was living with a good friend of mine in an old style terrace house, and the manhole, the portal up into the porthole, I'm not sure what you call it there. We call it the manhole, the sort of hatch that leads up into the roof, was in my bedroom. And for reasons I cannot understand to this day, it kept coming open. It kept lifting open, like it wasn't falling down, and it had old rusted hinges. Somehow it was popping open. And about the third time this happened, it was late at night. I was tucked up in bed with my doona up under my chin, ready for a good night's sleep. And through the darkness, saw it had come open again. And of course, initially completely flipped out, then calmed down, remembered that I don't believe in ghosts and monsters necessarily, but could there be something up there that might be a character? Could I come up with an idea here? And so I grabbed a pen and paper and I imagined immediately this ghost made of wax, with seaweed for hair and polished abalone shells for eyes, pebbles for teeth. And I understood immediately as well that she was sort of, grieving, I suppose, the fact that she was a ghost and that she couldn't remember her name from when she was a kid, didn't know who her family was, didn't know who she was. But I also understood immediately that she'd sort of experienced this more recent loss, in that she had another friend, another ghost, who was her best friend. But she hadn't seen her in a couple of years and was worried about her and didn't know where she was, and thought maybe that she just abandoned her. And so it was sort of a strange moment. I understood this character really, really quickly, and I felt very connected to her and very excited. So I grabbed a pen, piece of paper, wrote down everything I knew about her, and then the next day started writing that book. And that book, of course, was A Girl Called Corpse. And compared to all of my other manuscripts that I'd written, this one came together really, really quickly, in about 4 months, I think, 4 months for a first draft. And then I edited it over another 6 to 8 weeks before sending it out to agents. And it was actually, in the end, it was a UK-based agent that picked it up. And everything sort of changed from there. That first book became published. And then sort of my publishers turned around and were like, okay, what's next? We want this to be a series. And I didn't always imagined it just to be that one book, to be honest. But by the time I'd finished writing that one book, I'd fallen so in love with the setting, with this town of Elston Fright. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the books, Elston Fright is a forgotten fishing village, a place where nobody really goes. It's sort of almost trapped in time because nobody has come or gone in a really long time. Change from the outside world hasn't quite reached it. And it's the kind of place that draws evil magic to it, like a magnet. It crackles and fizzes with dark magic. There are three witches hidden out at a rock, inside a shack, which is tucked inside a rock out at sea, that none of us would be able to remember. We could see it, we would take a look at it, and the moment we looked away from it, we would forget all about the fact it existed. There are sea monsters in the water. There are all sorts of incredible creatures and mysteries around every corner in this town. And so, of course, by the time I'd finished writing A Girl Called Corpse, uh, I was so in love with this world and I saw so much potential in it that I knew I had to write more stories in this world and with these characters that I'd grown to love. But I didn't know what that story was. I didn't have the light bulb moment I did with A Girl Called Corpse. So writing this book was a very different. Writing The Lonely Lighthouse of Elston Fright was quite a different experience to writing the first book, A Girl Called Corpse. I had to sort of, I quite literally turned to the map in the first book and sort of took myself on a guided tour, a walking tour through Elston Fright. And I visited in my mind the cemetery and I wondered what may have happened there, what secrets might it hold, what history does it have that could potentially lend itself to a second story. I went down to the wharf and asked myself those same questions. I took myself scurrying down its dark laneways and looked in its hidden corners and thought, okay, what inspiration might be here for a story? But the place that drew me back to it, or drew me back to it time and time again, was, of course, the lighthouse, the far-flung lighthouse out on the point a where Flip Little, not a ghost, a living boy, Flip Little lives with his nan. And for generations, the Little family have been responsible for watching over Elston Fright and protecting it against dark magic. So, of course, at the start of The Lonely Lighthouse of Elston Fright, when a new dark magic, four weather ghouls known as the Poltergusts, descend upon Elston Fright, Flip and, of course, his new friends, Corpse and Girl, set out to save the day. So that's how this book has come about. And that's probably an overview of me, my writing, and two books that are out to date. I've just finished drafting the third and final book in this series. Or, well, actually, we've just finished the first round of edits. And yeah, that's sort of me.
What's the third book called? You're not allowed to. Oh, you can't tell us.
I don't know if it's that I'm not allowed to say. We also just haven't. I don't think we've quite landed on the final title yet. Titles are a tricky one. They change a lot. So yeah, we haven't quite. We've got probably a couple of front runners, but we haven't exactly decided yet.
Did you get to choose the titles of your books? I know some of our authors have said they kind of put a title together, and then when they went through the editing through Osborne, they were kind of like, "No, we're getting rid of that." Like,
Well, interesting you ask. So the first four words I wrote of A Girl Called Corpse were its title, A Girl Called Corpse. And in Australia, it didn't change. In the UK, we published initially as The Girl, the Ghost, and the Lost Name, and then republished the book 12 months later, approximately 12 months later, with its original title, A Girl Called Corpse. With The Lonely Lighthouse of Elston Fright, and now with this um, third book, it's been a much more collaborative effort. And when I say I thought titles were easy, I think I thought titles were easy because A Girl Called Corpse was used as the title without question, at least so initially. And yeah, now it's very much more a collaborative process. My publisher and my editor will usually make some suggestions. I'll go back with my own list of ideas, and usually it's a compromise somewhere in the middle where everyone's happy.
Negotiations back and forward. I've got more questions myself, but what I'm going to go through is the ones that are there at the moment. If anyone else thinks of any, pop them in, because I know as you were speaking, more and more questions were popping into my head. So the first question that's come up is from Jacqueline, which is, was the lighthouse in the book inspired by somewhere that you know?
Yes. So great question, because the entire series, The Town of Elston Fright, is actually based on the southwest of Australia, sort of an area called the Lewin Naturalist region, where when I was a kid, I used to go for a holiday there every summer. My family and I would holiday there for 2 weeks. And now my mum actually lives there full time. So it's a place that's very dear to my heart. It's incredibly beautiful, this place, but also a little bit wild and rugged and remote. And I've always felt whenever I get there and I step out of the car and you see the beautiful water with the rocks rising out of it, and the rocks are kind of these red rocks and this bright blue water, and there's these drooping, we have trees over here called like peppermint trees, which is different to peppermint, but they're these native trees that sway. And the reason they're named peppermint is during the summer when it's really hot, they release all these oils that have this very they fill the air with this really peppery, very specific scent. And whenever I get out of the car there and see it and smell it and hear it and feel it, it feels like the kind of place that might be hiding magic in it. And so the all of Elston Fright was based on that part of the world. And in fact, there are actually quite a few landmarks that have been inspired by the Southwest. But the lighthouse in particular, it's called Cape Lewin Lighthouse. It is, I'm reasonably sure it's the most southwesterly point of Australia. Or it might be, oh, sorry, no, that's absolutely incorrect. It is the tallest lighthouse on mainland Australia. Gosh, I'm probably wrong about that too. Point is, I went there as a kid. And again, lighthouses always feel magical. This one particularly so, because it's sort of out on this, set away from Augusta, the nearest town, and it's tall and imposing and grand and amazing. And it's at the point where the Southern Sea meets the Indian Ocean, and it's all very dramatic. And I'd been there as a kid, but I'd not been there again since. And whilst I was writing The Lonely Lighthouse of Elston Fright, I thought, okay, I'm going to take myself there again. And I went. And I met the lighthouse keeper, Paul. He'd been working there for 20 years. And he showed me around, and he told me the most incredible stories about the lighthouse, including a sort of an old urban legend that a cat had been blown from the top of it during a storm and landed safely in a bush nearby. And he'd never believed it to be true until he uncovered a local newspaper article on the topic. And so it had happened. Yeah, and so sort of fresh with ideas from my visit to Cape Lewin Lighthouse, I finished writing the book. And then I actually contacted Paul after it was published, and delivered a copy to him to thank him again for his help. And he said, "Oh, would you like to have an event here? Would you like to launch the book here at the Lighthouse?" And I immediately thought, yes. And he was incredible. He organized this in the whole event. It ended up being at the end of sort of 6 weeks, more or less, of sort of publicity. It was the very final event. And I remember driving out there. It was a Wednesday afternoon, and my mum came along with me because she'd never been to one of my events. And Wednesday afternoon, in a really remote area, I was kind of said to mum, I'm like, do you think anyone's going to come? And she looks at me and she's like, Reece, it is Wednesday afternoon in the middle of nowhere. Of course, nobody's going to come. Uh, and we were wrong. Paul had done the most incredible job, and it was a fully booked event, and he had this incredible like patchwork quilt hung up on the wall of the lighthouse that felt very much in keeping with the feel of the Littles' home. Yeah, completely sold out event. We had, filled with kids from the local schools and their families. But it ended just up being such a special event because I was getting ready to speak and I turned around and maybe a meter away from me, there was a woman just looking at me and crying. And I had to just had this double take. And it was my year 11 English literature teacher.
Oh,
Uh,
hello.
and she come out, it was incredible. And then afterwards at the signings, I met a girl, a young girl, I think she was about nine or 10. And she told me that her great auntie had taught me in primary school. And it turned out her great auntie was Jan Hocking, who was a substitute teacher or relief teacher at my school in this tiny little farming town. And she was the teacher who first put like a book in my hands and said, you should read this. And it was The Magician's Nephew. So it was just this really special, beautiful event being there at the lighthouse where this book was inspired and having these incredible interactions with, yeah, really important people from my past.
I remember reading The Magician's Nephew as well. It was such a
Yeah.
fantastic book to read as a child. Oh, that's fantastic. I love that the whole place is based around kind of that area and that lighthouse. You can kind of feel it as you read it. I'm assuming is the rock there as well. Is there a rock? Yeah, no,
There
no.
is. There's a rock called Sugarloaf Rock that sits that this kind of this reddish rock sort of set out to sea. In my imagination, I pushed it further out to sea. It needed to be a little bit further out for the story to work. But yeah, this craggy rock that the waves kind of crash up against. So yeah, that's there. And the jetty as well at the wharf is based on the area. And also, this area is full of limestone caves. Like there are hundreds of them in the area. And there's one in particular called Jewel Cave, which is just the most, you step inside and it's got the most intricate and astonishing stalactites and stalagmites and rock formations, including some really delicate ones there's one in particular, I think they call it the fairy or something like that, where it's shaped itself into this strange shape that you could also almost might believe is a fairy. And so Jewel Cave, I won't spoil anything, but Jewel Cave appears in the Lonely Lighthouse of Elston Fright, and is home to some little winged creatures. That's all I'll say for now.
Interesting. I haven't started the second book yet because we're still doing A Girl Called Corpse. So I look forward to getting to that point. And you're selling this part of Australia to me. I have to say, I'm all about the natural beauty. I'm like, oh, this sounds incredible. Maybe girls, are we up for we did Romania a few weeks ago for like a trip out to some teams. So maybe at some point we'll come over to Australia and have like a
How,
team trip.
how did you go to like out to Transylvania? So out of
We didn't. So we're going to go back in March and run another training out there. And I think we may go over to that. We're just in Bucharest area and did a big spa and things, but it was beautiful. But
It's funny you mentioned that. After I finished high school, I did like I took a gap year and I did a gap year program teaching, sort of assisting with English teaching. I can't say I taught English because I spoke no Romanian. But I was assisting sort of and being a native speaker in a school in Bucharest. So I spent 6 months in Bucharest when I was, I think, 17. And there was a group of sort of 7 of us Australians on this program at different schools. And on weekends, we would jump on a train and head out to Brasov and Sanaya and go to Bran Castle, that incredible castle that's in no way linked to Vlad Tepes,
Yeah.
who was mentioned for Dracula. But anyway, I would explore that part of the world. And when I first sat down to write A Girl Called Corpse, I actually considered setting it there, and kind of obviously it wouldn't be coastal, but I imagined this icy, this chilling lake with an island in the middle of it. And the reason I decided against that in the end is just that there are so many stories like this set in, you know, Transylvania or Salem or those kinds of places. And I really wanted this to feel unique and to feel Australian, and to sort of, so I ended up drawing on an area I knew better and a place that was close to my heart. But yeah,
I
um,
think that really comes across as reading it as well. You can tell it's Australia as you read it. The creatures, the words you use, I think it really does come across, which is very different to the kind of books we normally have to sell to people. And I really like that. Okay, I'll move on to another question because, or I'm just going to talk forever. So Charlotte has asked, who inspired you both personally and in the literacy world?
oh, okay. Gosh, that's a tricky one. I mean, is it NAFTA? Is it a little bit NAFTA? So I'm still very much inspired by those teachers who encouraged me when I was young, and probably more broadly by teachers in general. Like I get to go to a lot of schools, and as part of what I do, to present writing workshops and storytelling sessions. And teachers and teacher librarians still astonish me, how hard they work, how dedicated they are to what they do. Um, in the literary world, there are some. I mean, I'm a huge fan of Jess Townsend. I know what she does. I know her personally. I get to see again how hard she works and just her incredible imagination. Um, and yeah, the books, the world she's created is just astonishing. My favorite writer is probably Neil Gaiman. I love his books. I love the Graveyard book. I think that was again probably front of mind when I decided to write something a bit darker and spookier. And Coraline goes without saying. Um, but yeah, that's sort of the first that comes to mind. I'm not sure if I have a better answer than that.
No, I think the best answer is always the one that comes to mind
Yeah.
first and feels right. Okay, Kerry and Sarah have put, what made you choose Osborne as a publisher, particularly as they are UK based?
Honestly, glowing recommendations from people who had worked with them. So my agent is UK based, and we spoke about Osborne, and they were named very early on as a UK publisher that I should be thinking about. But then I've also, I've made author friends, and I've spoken to those who published with Osborne, and everyone just, all everyone's experiences seem to be universally fantastic. And my experience has been the same. The level of support has been great. The sort of commitment to the books and marketing and promoting them. Yeah, and I also think you just get the impression when I speak to anyone at Usborne, I always get the impression that people really love what they do. I understand it's a business, but it's a business that's driven by a very genuine passion for books for young people. And so I think culturally it's just a really nice fit for me.
Did you ever get a chance to speak to Peter before he passed away?
No, I did.
Oh,
No, I
I
didn't.
think you would have really bonded. That's where the passion comes from. Assuming absolutely crazy, mad as a box of frogs, but absolutely fantastic to talk to. And the passion he had with every single book that got published, the way he'd read it, sniff it, lick it, honestly, he was a book licker. Like, and there was no question he was scared to ask. He was a real character, and I think you would have really loved that. But that's where it kind of filters down from, like, his real love of making sure every book that goes in front of the children was just to the top quality. Um, okay, Kath has said, do you need to read the first book to read the second one, or could it be a standalone?
It could be a standalone. So that's a very good question because a Girl Called Corpses is very much Corpse's story, and it's told just from her point of view, and it's quite a personal, um, in some ways, inward-looking story. I mean, there is a lot of action, and there are witches and sea monsters, and there is plot that really drives it forward. But because so much of the story is just her on this very personal quest to try and find out who she was as a kid, to try and find out what her name was and who her family was, and her only companion for most of the book, or at least for the first half of the book, is her best friend, a huntsman spider by the name of Simon, with whom she can communicate.
I love that he
Um,
just clicks as well, so we never actually know what he's saying, but you get the kind of
yeah.
idea.
Yeah, well, I'm hoping people, yeah, you can work out what's being said by how Corpse responds to him. So Simon is a friend of hers. I know some people don't like spiders. I apologize, but it made sense for her living in a roof. And he is possibly the friendliest spider you'll ever meet. He's actually based on my dog Hagrid, who is much, much larger. But Hagrid is sort of loyal and friendly, and I just shrunk Hagrid down in my head, gave him 4 extra legs, and that became Corpse's sidekick, Simon. And so, yeah, book one is very much just them going on this quest. But book two, on the other hand, is really Flip Little's story. So this is actually told in dual perspective. So it moves between Flip's point of view and Corpse's point of view, but in each chapter. But it really is Flip's story, and I wrote it specifically designed to be a standalone. So there is an overarching plot in the series. Of course, there is a continuation of Corpse's story from book one, but I wanted to make sure that if kids picked up this book, having not read the first, they could sit down and have an enjoyable reading experience, and that there was a complete story, beginning, middle, and end, um, and that any context or any additional information they needed to know that may have been present in the first book was made available to them again, so that it really can be enjoyed as a standalone. Yeah.
That's great. It's really good for us to know that, because we do a lot of school book fairs or a lot of events where people will come and pick up a book, and that's one of the questions they know. Do we have to start at the beginning, or can we just buy this book now? Okay, Katie has said, me and my daughter Roxy are watching. She is 10 years old and asks, do you get to say in the front cover and illustrations?
Firstly, hi Roxy. Thanks for the great question. I do get a say. I'm really lucky in that both my Australian publisher as well as Usborne in the UK are let me be part of that process. So they send me early pictures, so we'll work together to find an illustrator, and they will send me some suggestions of talented illustrators that they think might be a fit. Together, we decide on who will work best, and then they get that illustrator to draw an initial picture, and then I get some feedback. So I get to have my say as well until we end up with a cover that we're all really happy with.
Excellent. Okay, Jacqueline said, what is the process of writing a book? Do you have to have an agent, or can you go direct to the publisher?
I'm not, most of the time, it's best to have an agent, would be my answer to that. I'm not sure what it's like in the UK, but in Australia, there are a handful of publishers that will accept submissions directly. So you could typically send to a publisher directly, and it would go on what they very unflatteringly call a slush pile. But if you find an agent first, there are just so many benefits to that, and that's what I did. So I approached agents, and I found the agent that I wanted to work with based on reading the acknowledgements sections of my favorite books. So Sophie Anderson's House with Chicken Legs, Nevermore by Jess Townsend. At that stage, the first Amari book by B.B. Olsen had just come out. They all sort of mentioned their literary agent. And I loved all those books so much. And I thought, well, if I love the books that she represents, then maybe she'll like my book, or maybe, we have similar tastes. And so I approached her, and we ended up working together. And my experience of having an agent has been incredibly positive because they have the relationships with publishers, so they are able to send your manuscript out more widely. But then also, and you're off the slush pile. The publishers sit up and pay attention because they're receiving the book from someone whose opinion they value very highly and whose tastes they know and trust. So it certainly, having an agent certainly gets your book read by more publishers, more editors, and more quickly. And then, of course, there's all the added benefits that come after that. So I'm a writer. I'm not a negotiator of deals or a reviewer of contracts. I'm not a lawyer. I don't know how to do any of those things. Also, writers tend to be very gentle, soft personalities, and we dodge the topic of money and how do you value your own work. And so having an agent, a sort of having that partnership with an agent and have them be able to go and have those business conversations is really invaluable. But there are some publishers, at least in Australia, that are open to direct submissions. I'm not sure if that's the case in the UK.
I don't know, unless it's changed. Osborne never used to take anyone unless they're through an agent. So that's the advice, because people will come to me and others in the team sometimes. They go, how do I get it published? It's like, the first step is you need an agent here to be able to publish with us. They just would have so many requests that's how they do it. It's through agents, only, unless it's changed. So Kath has put again, do you offer like Zoom discussions or workshops like this for UK primary schools?
I've done one. I've done a number of them. I did when we first released A Girl Called Corpse as The Girl, the Ghost, and the Lost Name as part of the publicity tour. I did exactly that. I did a Zoom workshop or a Zoom talk, really, with kids in the UK. I've not done any of it since then, but I would be very open to it. And my obviously, I speak of countless schools, libraries, literary festivals here in Australia. And so I'm very much practiced at that, and adapting it to Zoom is really quite easy. So if that is something that you're able to facilitate, I would absolutely love to be part of that. And typically sort of I can do just a straight author talk, but what I find to be a little bit more fun is if there's an activity involved. And so I do a bit of a create your own spooky character workshop where I give students my 7-ingredient top secret recipe for a spooky character. They create a character, and then we talk about, and if we get a chance to, we actually, we put together an example, but we talk about how character can be used as a jumping off point for telling story, and how if you know your character really well and you know what they want, telling the story and finding the right plot becomes that little bit easier.
Yeah, it's really lovely. So about 2 weeks ago, I did a author event with Rowan Foxwood, who's the writer of Hearts Here, and she did something similar to that. We did a work, the creative writing, we're kind of building the characters, some brilliant questions to get the children thinking about different objects, and this object then became magical, and what power could it have, and really like out thinking outside the box. And they were so engaged with it, and to watch them go away and love the book after that was just incredible. Kerry has put, do you have any plans to come to the UK? Schools would love you to do in-person author talks.
I would love to, but no current plans. It's sort of, no plans currently, sadly, but looking for an opportunity to make it happen for sure. It's just so far and so expensive.
I know. It's the same reason I haven't ever gone out to them. Like, it's so far away, but I so want to go. But you
And
also
I've spent look, it's just far. And I've spent lots of time in the UK. I, like so many Australians, did my 2-year working holiday visa once upon a time. And I love the UK, and I have so many friends, especially in London, and would love to get back there for personal reasons as well. But yeah, at the moment, it's just tricky. It's just far and expensive. I say that a lot, but
we're trying to get
flights
head office to like bring you over for a conference or something.
Could we?
We've got a leadership academy tomorrow. So what we'll do, Reece, we'll all go in tomorrow and be like, so we had this brilliant Zoom last night. You really need to pay to get him over here. We'll see what we can do.
Thank you. I would appreciate that. Yeah. if we all band together, then we can make it happen.
Yes, I agree. Kerry's also said how is best to contact you to book these workshops online for schools and about how to find out about the costings.
Email is probably best. So it's just, it's just reece@reececarter.com.au, but let me just type it in the chat so that we've got spelling correct. Have I spelt it correctly? Yes, I have. So that's my email. And that's the best way to get in touch with those inquiries.
Okay, if anyone else has got any questions, please pop them in the chat or you can just unmute yourself. In the meantime, I've got a couple. So is writing now your full-time job?
It is, yeah.
Exciting.
Which is so, which is was sort of a real gear shift, I suppose, from not having a novel published and then all of a sudden having it published with a series in place and uh, you know that allowed me to write full time, which is what I'd always wanted to do. So it was a real shift to all of a sudden find myself writing full time, and now I'm at this interesting spot where I've submitted to my Australian publisher the third book, as I said, and I'm starting to think about, okay, what next, and putting together new ideas, which is an exciting place to find myself now. I love this series and love these characters, but after having worked on them for a number of years, it's kind of fun to be looking at new ideas now, looking at new characters and what's next. But yeah, it's such a fun job. I love the fact that I get to do it full time. I went to the gym with a friend of mine. This is going back a couple of months now, maybe even 6 months. But we went and exercised together at lunchtime. He was on his work break from work and he has a corporate job. And we're sort of finishing the workout and he's like, oh, I've got to go back to work now. And I'm like, yeah, me too. And he sort of reeled off the things he had to do. And they're things that I didn't really understand, certain meetings and engaging with such and such a person and putting together a proposal for this, that, and the other. And then I said, oh, well, this afternoon I have to write 6 new magic spells. And I realized that my job is pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we feel a bit like that as well, that we have this job which is kind of just selling books and popping into schools and going out, and it's such a lovely way to live where you set your own hours and you set your own times and obviously get to come along to things like this. People are asking, saying we need a boys book suitable for 5 to 8 year olds, and younger fiction would be amazing. Are you going to stick to the same age, or do you think you might branch out into?
I think for now, I will stick with middle grade for a number of reasons. A, as I said, it's such that readership. Like when I was that age, when I was the age of that readership, sort of 8 to 12 books were so important for me. B, I know how to do it. I'm experienced with middle grade now. Writing, I'm not sure if you use the term junior fiction over there. That's sort of what we were, that 5 to 8 year old age there. Sort of that stepping stone between picture books and novels, where they're still highly illustrated, but they kind of resemble a novel, and that's such unique skill. I did toy with the idea, and I spoke to a friend of mine here in Australia who's doing it, and it's a completely different type of writing. And so I think one day would I love to do it? Absolutely, but it's going to take some more learning, basically, and I think you almost start over from scratch, because to be able to write for that age group is, yeah, just a very specialized kind of writing.
Cool.
But I would love to, I would love to write picture books at one point, but again, that has its unique set of challenges. Yeah, I would kind of love to, maybe even YA. I mean, I want to write for adults one day. I basically want to write for everyone, is my point. But I think for right now, middle grade is the sweet spot for me. And there are so many more characters and so many more worlds that I've got whirring around in the back of my head that I want to see on the page, that I think that that's me for the foreseeable future.
Fantastic. Okay, going back to A Girl Called Corpse. how did you come up with the concept of that when someone dies, they no longer remember? Because that's quite unique. Normally, when we think of ghosts or things like that, they know who they were. So that kind of took me by surprise at this whole like, well, I don't know anything about the past or
It's a great question. I don't know if I have an answer for it, apart from the fact that when the moment I imagined Corpse up in my own roof, she was this fully fleshed out character. It's sort of hard to describe it more than that. I knew that she didn't know who she was, and that there was this sense of yearning to find out, and also this. I mean, anyone you'll know that Corpse is a little bit prickly, a little bit of anger at the injustice over it all. So the idea that as a ghost she just wouldn't remember, that sort of came out of nowhere. She appeared as a fully realized character. Um, yeah, I'm sure there's probably some deeper level to that, some subconscious something or other that I believe or had to say, but I have to say that for my therapist. I'm not. She might be able to help shine some light on
Bring-
what.
why do you write these books?
Eyes just widening.
No, I think it's a great concept anyway. I think that really kind of pulled us in of like, okay, this is slightly different than your normal kind of ghost story.
Well, I think I wanted to engage with, perhaps because I wanted to engage with the theme of identity as well. It made sense. I don't want to spoil the book for anyone who hasn't read it, but or who's still reading it. But her character arc in this book is one of not knowing who she is, um, wanting to know who she is, and wanting a family, wanting a place to belong. And perhaps because they'd been such, as a kid for me, living in this rural regional area where I had my brother and sister, but I didn't have a lot of friends obviously around me. And then I went to boarding school quite young. I was 11. And it was a very like macho male dominated kind of environment at that time. And I'm gay, and I, was becoming more aware of that through high school. I always felt out of place, and sort of scrambling for a place to belong. And so I think because those themes were so important to me as a younger person, perhaps that's why I wanted to write about that. And the way that to write about that for kids, like it felt like, not knowing their name, not knowing their family, not having a place to belong sort of made sense. So perhaps that's why I went with her having her memories. But to get back to A Girl Called Corpse itself, the arc that we sort of see that I I do kind of know who I am. I've had such tunnel vision trying to reclaim these old memories that perhaps I lost sight of the fact that I've got these friends, like these two wonderful friends that I've made, who act like found family, who we take care of each other and support each other and love each other. And also, I do, I may not know, I chose the name Corpse for myself. So she kind of realizes throughout the journey that she's taken on in this book that, in a way, she already does have, in an important way, she already does have an identity and a family and a name. She'd just been so stuck on the fact that it had to look a certain way that it had perhaps made her blind to what she already had around her.
Oh, it's interesting because I haven't obviously got too far through the book at the moment, but that kind of finding one's identity. Have you ever considered kind of going down the path of like writing a book about that coming out? And because I know we've got a few of them, I'm trying to figure the name of the one I recently read that we've got. And I found that really interesting to read, obviously, as a male's perspective of the feelings they go through as a teenage boy, that kind of realizing that they're liking men and not liking women and what's turning them on with that. And that's something as a woman I've never really even stopped to consider. I found that really, really interesting.
I think too, I mean, it would be interesting. That would obviously again mean writing YA. I think, that's
Yeah.
a that would mean writing writing young adult, or even writing for adults, depending on what the exact story is. There are a lot of people who already do it really well. Um, and in a weird way, personally, I'm not as interested in writing about the gay experience as I am the more universal experiences. The experiences of identity and belonging, they're sort of broader than that. And they're something that, in one way or another, at some degree, in some point in our lives, we all experience in different ways. I think getting to know who we are, getting to find our place in the world. And so even though I might draw on my own experiences, I kind of find those bigger topics, those universal, family, friendship, bravery, good versus evil. I find those more fun to engage
You
with.
can see the passion in you when you speak of those, like it fuels you, that comes alive. Um, okay, if anyone's got any last questions, unmute yourself and ask or pop them in now. Reece, have you got any questions you'd like to ask any of us at all?
When can I get to the UK?
Well, we're going to try and get that, make
Well,
that
we
happen as soon as
make that
possible.
happen. How quickly can it
Okay,
happen?
we'll make that happen. We'll work on that. We'll make sure when they put in the budget next year that there's some to bring you over. Um, okay.
Is he on
Anyone else?
Twitter, Sarah? Are
Sorry?
you on Twitter? Because very often we tweet about our books. It'd be nice if you could retweet us, but we weren't sure.
I'm not on
Thanks.
Twitter, no. I jumped ship when Elon Musk took over. Yeah, so Instagram's the only social platform I'm on. I found that trying to juggle multiple was just a bit overwhelming. And Instagram's certainly my strongest. So not Twitter, but if anyone has an Instagram um, account that they use for work, please feel free to tag me and I will share to my stories wherever I can.
Do you enjoy like the promotion side of this kind of career, or do you prefer just to be hidden away in writing?
I enjoy the promotion side of things, but the way it works best for me is sort of if I separate that from my writing time. So when I'm writing, it can be quite overwhelming to try and juggle publicity and being on, and then going back into writing mode. For me to write, I need sort of complete focus. I mean, this is going to make me sound absolutely bonkers, but when I'm drafting, I wake up at 2 a.m. And I usually write for 3 hours and I get my best work done in the dark because I'm not going to get texted, I'm not going to get emailed, I'm not going to get a phone call. I can throw myself fully into the world and write the story. And so I'll do 3 great hours of writing. Then I get up, go to the gym early, walk the dog. And by that stage, 90% of my writing is done. I might do a little throughout the rest of the day, but I struggle to, yeah, I need sort of complete focus to be able to write. And so that's why with publicity, it's such a joy to meet, booksellers, teacher librarians, students, Usborne partners. But that, yeah, I like to keep it kind of separate because having that engagement is so important. But I feel like it's almost useful for me to divide my time into, okay, well, this is a publicity week or a publicity month, and this next 3, 4, 6 months is all about the book.
Fantastic. Okay, Natasha's just put brilliant to see you on here. Thanks so much. Yeah, so I think we're pretty much done an hour now. So thank you so much. That's been incredible to learn more about those books. It helps us so much when we go to sell them and when we go to answer questions. Obviously, we read them, we have our own take on them, but it adds another layer when you can tell a child, about your background, about how it's written, about the fact that it's a real lighthouse and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It really, really adds to it. So thank you so much for getting up early. Although I guess if you get up at 2 a.m. to write, then perhaps it's not as early.
I'm not currently drafting. So normally today would be a sleep-in day, but it was a pleasure to wake up and speak with you all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Some of you girls, I will see you tomorrow. Yeah, so thank you again. Go and enjoy your day now and dog walking or whatever you're up to.
Sure.
And we will work on getting you over to the UK as quick as possible. Yeah, fingers crossed. All right.
Thanks so
Thanks,
much for your time,
everybody.
everybody. Enjoy your
Bye.
evening. Bye-bye.